brush tool is one of your most versatile tools and one of the tools you're going to find yourself using the most. In the way it works with layer masks and the way it works with just general design, the brush tool is an essential tool to get good at and to get good with. So if you hit B on your keyboard, that'll get you your brush tool. And before we begin, we need to stop and look at the layers because you're probably seeing this symbol right here, kind of a no, you can't. So in the layers panel, you'll notice that you have one artboard that has your work lit up in blue. I need you on that layer specifically. Now, anytime you start working with the brush tool, I recommend creating a new layer. That way you're not damaging any pixels underneath it. By having your own layer, it kind of creates your own safety net when dealing with your brush. So let's zoom on in and look at what the brush tool can do. So hit B on your keyboard, get your brush tool, and up in your control panel, your options bar, check out this little area, this menu for your brush size. So it's this little arrow right here. The brush size can be determined based on how many pixels big you want it to be. These are the first two and main two things you need to look at when dealing with your brushes. Now, to make your brush size bigger, if you look to the right of the letter P, there are brackets that will make your brush bigger or smaller. All right. So we're going to start on a soft brush at about 50 pixels. So go to hardness 0 and make sure your size is about 50 pixels. You can type that in if need be. I want you to pick a color that you like today, whatever color floats your boat. And we're going to hover just over top of this little dot right here. And we're going to click one time. Now notice that when you clicked, you now have a faded, a feathered look to your brush. That's what a soft hardness brush does. Make your brush a little bigger, click on the next one. Make it a little bigger, click on the next one. And you'll notice the bigger you get, the bigger your fade gets, the bigger your feather gets. So it keeps a little bit of a cleaner look. Now let's change that to a 100% hardness brush, going back down to that 50 pixel size. And we're going to hover over this dot, clicking one time. That is the difference. The hard brush creates a hard line for you. And that hard line gives you a very distinct shape, almost like the shape tool itself. So there is a big difference in between these two types of brushes, whether they be soft or whether they be hard brushes. The softer brushes give you these fades, the harder brushes do not. Why you would need each one is dependent on what you're doing, right? For example, if I'm making it look like headlights are coming at me, I'm probably going to want this soft brush. I'm not going to want headlights that have a hard line. So it just depends. Let's move over to the right. Now your brush is generally set in a circular fashion. And just so we're clear on this, if you hit caps lock on your keyboard, it won't come in looking right. It'll be a little crosshair. Turn caps lock off, it'll be that circle. Now inside of your menu, you have this little compass up at the top. And this compass determines the roundness of your shape. So you see I'm a perfect circle now. If I squish this down, grabbing these little circles at the top, I get this more oval shape. So I'm going to click one time to create that oval shape. Now, which angle this is going at is completely dependent on this arrow right here. So if I want this to go up and down, I can drag that up and I can create my vertical oval. See if you can use that to create this little X shape right here. Have it pointed towards the corners, make it a little thinner. Click once. Change the angle of that again, click again. So you can see how you can alter the angles of your brush and how your overall brush is going to look. Make your brush back to a circle, have it angled the right direction towards the right, and you can click right here to create your circle at the end. Now we want to do this because we want to make sure that this stays as a circle, because otherwise it'll stay wherever you left it. So be very careful about that. Now there are blending modes for your different types of brushes that you can paint with. These do different things depending on what you're looking for. If you click on dissolve and click on this little circle, you might see that raggedy edge around the end here. So there are some different options for your brush. Make sure to change that back to normal, otherwise you will get stuck with it. Alright, so let's move down to this little area right here. So to create straight lines along the way, I'm going to shrink my brush down so it's about the size of this dot here. And I'm going to click one time. Now as I click there, it creates my dot. If I were to click, hold, and drag, trying to create a straight line, there's very little likelihood that I'm going to create a straight line. My mouse is not going to move straight for me, so I need to alter how that looks. Instead, if I click right here and hold Shift, as I'm holding Shift and dragging, it will create a perfectly straight line for me. So that's what I'm looking for. Now this works based on up and down, left and right. It does not work as far as going at different angles. So if I were to click here on this point again, hold Shift and move down, it creates a straight line for me. If I were to try to stop right here and move left, it's not going to do it. It's only going to move in the direction that I started in, whether that be up or down. So I'll need to click again, hold Shift, drag over to the left. Click again, hold Shift, drag down. Click again, hold Shift, drag over. So see if you can make this. It's not terribly complicated. Holding that Shift button really just equals out to a straight line. And that's what you need to keep in mind as you're making this. Moving over to the right. To create at an angle, we don't click and hold Shift. So what we're going to do here is a little differently, and we've done this in a previous lesson as well. If you click one time on one of these dots, and then hold Shift and click on the next location, it'll draw a straight line between both of the places you just clicked. Hold Shift again, click on the next one, and just move through, just like that. Easy enough, just holding Shift now, and clicking instead of dragging, just click. Good. Alright, so drawing with your mouse can be difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. So what I want you to do is put your mouse right at the end of this line. I want you to click, hold, and drag, and try to stay as close on this line as you possibly can. You'll find that it is not easy to do. Sometimes the struggle is real with drawing. Sometimes you have to go back and redraw. That's just life, right? Click on your options up here and change this to a 0% hardness. And up at the top, I also want you to change the opacity on this. I want you to go to 50% on your opacity. Changing your color so that it's a slightly different color. And I want you to attempt to draw the second line as well. So the soft brush creates this more faded line. It's not as cleanly edged as the previous one. And because of that opacity drop, it's going over top of that red and blending those two colors together. So you have options up in your option bar for how this brush is going to work and how it's going to be affected. So pop that opacity back up to 100 and then let's move forward. Now moving down, we've got some different ways of mixing our colors. So there are brushes and then there are other types of brushes. So if I click on brush, I can see underneath I've got a color replacement brush and a mixer brush. These do different things. The one I want to focus on is the mixer brush. So before I do that, I'm going to grab my brush tool and I'm just going to paint a swatch. A swatch is just an area of color, right? I'm going to get my other color and I'm going to paint that over here on the right. Now these two colors are butting up against each other in this middle area. And the mixer tool, the mixer brush, will mix these two colors together. Now again, there are options up here on how it works. Different ways of blending depending on how you want it to be, how wet the mix is, how much it flows. But if you kind of think about dragging your finger through wet paint, that's what it's going to do. The bigger your brush, the bigger the pull through that paint. So I want you to mix these two colors together using the mixer brush so you can kind of see how that does. To me, using tools like this creates cooler looks for your brushing instead of having simple little lines, simple shapes. Alright, so let's go over to the brush tool again, and I want to paint 3 color swatches this time. So I'm going to paint my red, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to get green, paint some green, and then I'm going to grab blue and paint some blue over here. Alright, so I'm just creating 3 swatches. Try to keep it on that box where you can. Now there are different types of brushes as well. So if I go into my brush settings, I've been sticking under the general setting. But if I close general, I can see I've got dry, wet, and special effects brushes. We're going to look at all of these. but I want you to go under the wet media brush. And I want you to notice that in the corner of each one of these brushes, you're going to have areas that show what this tool is, whether it be a brush, like these two, whether it be the smudge tool, like this one, or the mixer tool, like this one. And if I were to click on this one, it's going to give me that mixer brush. So be very careful on what brush you're on when picking the brushes. So the one I want you to pick is the third one down, the smudge tool, the one that says Kyle's Paintbox Wet Blender. And by clicking on that, I'm going to keep a fairly small brush. I'm going to be at about 30 pixels. And I'm going to click, hold, and drag through these colors. And you'll see it gives me a much different version of how it mixes these colors along the way. So feel free to mix these how you would like. You can do just one side or the other, but have a nice little mix going on between your colors. Again, it's just a different way to play with your brush. And there are a number of these out there. Don't feel like that one's the only one you can use. There are a bunch in this set, and there are more online, and we'll look at those in just a minute. Now let's go to our dry media brushes. Now when we're talking about dry media, wet media, I want you to think in terms of like the tool that they use, right? So dry media is like pencil or charcoal or things like that, pastels, powders. The wet media brush is like oils and paints, right? And that's what it's supposed to give the look of. So I want you to experiment with a couple of these. Now the brush needs to be fairly large to be able to see it. You can see the shape that it's drawing, and what it's going to do is it's going to repeat that shape over and over again. If you looked very carefully, you can see that it's that exact same shape repeated over and over again as it draws. Try another one. Try the drawing box, see what it looks like. Make your brush bigger so you can see it. And you can see how these brushes create different looks for what you're going for. Try the charcoal, click and drag. You can see what I'm getting at. There are a bunch of different brushes in there to kind of play around with. Now let's go down to the special effect brushes. These can create a lot of different looks depending on what you've got. The splatter brushes do just that. They make stuff look like splatter. So pick on one of those and just kind of click and drag around this area. You'll see how it splatters. The bigger you make your brush, the bigger your splatters are, but it does go kind of wild outside of where you're clicking. Be very careful of that. The different screen tones that are down here at the bottom create kind of a grid type pattern. Feel free to make a brush bigger and try that out. There are a lot of things to tinker with, and that's what it really comes down to. So things like this scratch blend, that might create a much different look for whatever it is you're trying to do, right? Experimentation is key. Now you can make your own brushes, and this is where we get a little complicated. Over on the right hand side, I've got a list of how this is supposed to look, so over there if you need it. But to create our own custom brushes, we first need our brush panel. So let's go to Window, and again, anytime you need a panel, it's under Window. Go to Brush or Brush Settings. It should open up both of those. So right here, I'll see my brushes and my brush settings. So I want to start on my brushes. I want to go to General and go to Soft Round. Let's start there. We're starting with a soft round brush. Let's go to Brush Settings. And over on the right, again, I've got my options that I'm going to be going with so you can see what they look like. So the first, we're going to start with a size of about 60 pixels. And you can see down here, this is the line that we would be creating. We have options for the hardness. I want to create a 100% hard brush. You can see that that hardens up the line on the outside of this shape. Now spacing is where it gets a little awkward. If you stretch this spacing out, you'll see that the general brushes are just a circle, and that circle is being repeated a bunch of times to make that straight line. So I want my spacing to be about 175. Now, moving down, we get different options for our brush, and we can play around with how our brush looks based on these different options. Feel free to go wild with this and really experiment. Just because I have a list of what I'm doing here doesn't mean you have to do exactly what I'm doing. So under Shape Dynamics, I'm going to open that up. Size jitter, angle jitter, roundness jitter. What does the word jitter mean? Jitter just means difference. How much size do you want different? So if I make my size different, I'll have small circles and I'll have big circles along the way. So my size jitter is 70. Moving down to minimum diameter, I'm going to leave that the same. I'm going to move down to angle jitter, and this is how angled it is. Now you won't see anything happen here, and I'm going to show you why. It comes down to the roundness jitter. How round are my shapes? So if I go down to 100%, some of these will be very flat, some of them will be very circular. And then I change my angle. You can see the angle will change on those shapes. So I'm going to go to about 20. So minimum roundness, how round do I want it to be at a pure minimum? About 25%. So this just alters the shapes that it's going to create as it draws. Under scattering, scattering is how much you want it to move and change position. I'm going to push my scatter up to about 80%, and you'll see it kind of moves those circles around so that it looks a little different. My count's going to be 3. That's going to be how many of these circles it makes in a single click. My count jitter, how much that's going to change, whether it stays at 3 every time or a little bit less, a little more, I'm going to go to 25%. Now sometimes the color options will mess up a little bit. They won't let you do it. I'm not sure what that is. But under color dynamics, you should be able to alter the color a little bit. So hue jitter, change that up to 100% so that it kind of changes each time you click. All right, so these are my basics of how I want this to look. I'll shrink that panel down and I'll move over to my custom shapes. Now with my brush selected, I can click and drag. You'll see it makes my new brush. But when I click again, the hue jitter is changing the color of it. So every time I click, my color is going to change about 25% depending on where it is. So it'll go up, it'll go down, it'll change a little bit along the way. So play around with that, see what kind of custom brush you make. Finding custom brushes that are already out there is easy. And we're going to go check out a website called brusheasy.com. So inside of Brush Easy, we end up with lots of different brushes that we can choose from. They'll have some defaults kind of set right here for you. You can also search for different types, check the top brushes, kind of whatever floats, right? So I'm going to choose one of these brushes that looks interesting to me. I'm going to go to this watercolor splats. Now it pops up with a few different things along the way, so be careful. And there is an option here that says free download. Now when you click on that, it should download a file. If it doesn't, try refreshing the page, try it again. There are times that it's just not going to download. Remember, you get what you pay for, and these are free, right? So being they're free, there might be some issues with them along the way. Now when I download that, it's going to pop up in my downloads. I'm going to click on that and it shows up as a zip file. So because it's a zip file, I have to unzip it by clicking on it. And this is what I'm going to find. I'm going to find a few different file types. Now in this, I've got how to install the brushes, I've got watercolor splats, so whatever. The thing I'm looking for looks like this. It ends in .abr. All these other files are unneeded. Sometimes it'll only download the ABR file, and if that's the case, then good, that's what I need. Now, on Mac and PC, these things work differently. So if you're on a Mac and you double click on this ABR, it may make you choose an application for it to go into the first time you do it. So you'll need to go to your applications, you'll need to go to Photoshop, you'll need to go to Photoshop again, and then hit open, and it should work. On a PC, if I double click on this, it should install that immediately. Now, if I go into my brushes again and look towards the bottom, I now have these brushes already set for me. So if I want a dried blood splatter, which is what it looks like it gave me a lot of, even though I clicked on watercolors, if I click on this, it'll give me this shape. Now, if I make this small and click and drag, it's going to drag like any normal brush. But if I make it bigger and just give a single click, it gives me a much different look. So let's go back to Brush Easy real quick, and we're going to search for different types of brushes. So there are a number of brushes out there that you can play with. So lightning brushes have just an impressive look to them. Again, clicking on them, installing the ABR, going back and checking your brushes. Now, if you double click on it a few times, you can always delete these folders by clicking on them and just hitting delete if you have too many of them. So the lightning brush tends to come in pretty big. Keep that in mind. But when I click one time, I get this nice lightning bolt that just goes across my screen. Real nice. Make it smaller. And again, you can change the colors of these so they're not the same color every time. Bam, there's another lightning bolt. Back to Brush EZ, we can kind of look at a different way of doing this. Some of the basics I recommend having are fire, lightning, clouds are a big one that you're going to use a lot. There's no need to go find a pretty sky if you can just draw out your pretty sky. So kind of look through some of these. The moons create interesting look. I want you to find 5 different brushes that you can utilize inside this program, and I want you to paint 5 different brushes down here at the bottom so that you can see what these look like. You can start experimenting with them, and you can kind of play around with these different things. Now, what we've gone over today is the brushes and the brush panels, the mixer tool. We looked at the smudge tool when it came to some of the special effect brushes and the wet media brushes. We looked at how to create your own brushes using the brush settings panel. And we also looked at how to install brushes on your computer using this program, using Brush EZ. So there are a number of ways to play with your brushes, and we're going to look in more detail at what we can do with these brushes at a later date. But understand the basics of brushes is really key to your understanding of the basics of how to use Photoshop in a unique way. So that's your daily dose of design. If this has helped you in any way, please subscribe to the channel and keep building your creative toolbox. See you in the next one.